In a few minutes, we are going to talk to Connecticut Senator Chris Murphy, which I'm very grateful for because he gave a very powerful speech on the Senate floor yesterday, demanding that his colleagues take action. And I was thankful for those words because, among many other things, it reminded us that we can't become numb. Because what is happening right now does not have to happen. It is not inevitable. It is a choice that our leaders and the powerful forces behind them have made and are continuing to make every day that they refuse to do anything at all that could make these horrific events less likely. America has more gun than people. We have more mass shootings by far than any other peer nations. Those two things are obviously related. So now, to talk a little bit more about how we got to a place where those two things can be true, it is time for a closer look. Entrenched powerful forces have perpetrated a monumental, decades-long fraud in convincing large numbers of people that it is their constitutional right to own arsenals of military-grade weaponry. And they've invested large sums in convincing people that that made-up right, a right 5 Republican justices essentially invented out of whole cloth not that long ago, is constantly under threat. And to be clear, that's not just my opinion. I'm not a constitutional scholar. I think that's clear. Constitutional scholars do not have tiny figurines of Andy Samberg on their desk that say, "My doink fell off." I'm not saying they don't have them. I'm just saying if they do, they're kept safely in a drawer. So I didn't just come up with the take that the unregulated right to own military-grade weaponry is a fraud on my own. It was the opinion of former Supreme Court Chief Justice Warren Burger, a conservative who said this in 1991.
If I were writing the Bill of Rights now, there wouldn't be any such thing as the Second Amendment.
Which says?
That a well-regulated militia being necessary for the defense of the state, that people's rights to bear arms. This has been the subject of one of the greatest pieces of fraud, I repeat the word fraud, on the American public by special interest groups that I have ever seen in my lifetime. Now just look at those words. There are only 3 lines to that amendment. A well-regulated militia. If the militia, which was going to be the state army, was going to be well-regulated, why shouldn't 16 and 17 and 18 or any other age persons be regulated in the use of arms, the way an automobile is regulated?
First of all, it's a shock just to see a conservative justice say something in public without sneering like the villain from every 80s teen comedy. Second, he's right. The words well-regulated are right there in the amendment. There's no mystery. It's not Wordle or the New York Times spelling bee. We don't have to guess, which, by the way, it's what I do, guys. After I get the easy ones, I just start typing in fake words and hoping they're real. Moaxie? Is Moaxie a word? Let me try 30 more times. The idea that the Second Amendment guarantees an individual's unregulated right to own an arsenal of military-grade weaponry is so insane and was shrugged off as ridiculous for so long that in 1982, Senate Republicans went to the absurd lengths of issuing a report that claimed to have discovered clear and long-lost proof that the Second Amendment was intended as an individual right of the American citizen to keep and carry arms. It is absolutely insane that Republicans claim to have found long-lost proof that changed the meaning of a document written in 1787 in 1982, which definitely means, one of them had just seen Raiders of the Lost Ark and then said, you know, sometimes people find old I'm just saying. I mean, how'd it go down? Did Nicolas Cage find a secret Post-it note hidden inside the Liberty Bell? We were so focused on the crack, we never looked inside. But that should give you an idea of how preposterous and unhinged this whole idea is. The side that claims to care about the plain language of the Constitution and the original meaning of the Founding Fathers had to pretend to unearth some secret hidden proof that the Second Amendment actually means something completely different from what it obviously says, which is totally divorced from how other sane countries deal with these kind of horrors. Australia, the UK, New Zealand, Norway, they've all responded to mass shootings with stricter gun laws or campaigns to confiscate or buy back guns, and those laws have worked. Because again, there is an obvious correlation between how many guns we have in this country and how many gun deaths we have. And by the way, when local governments have tried gun buyback programs on a small scale here in the US, they've often been successful. In fact, just a few days ago, the police department in Sacramento held a gun buyback event in exchange for $50 gas gift cards. The event, which was supposed to last for 5 hours, got more takers than expected. The department announced just 45 minutes into the event that it had exhausted its supply of gift cards due to overwhelming response. I'm not surprised. You know what I'd give up for a $50 gas gift card right now? Half a tank? That's why I dress like this right now. I gave all my suits back as part of a buyback program, and now I don't have to pay for gas for another week. I also gave up haircuts, which is why I'm now on an ongoing mission to get cast in the next Marvel movie as old Loki. I think I can do it. Because I look like 5 to 10 months older than Tom Hiddleston. But even more revealing than the success of the event itself were the reasons people gave for turning in these guns. Among other reasons, community members most commonly cited a lack of experience or knowledge with firearms, lack of knowledge or the legality of firearms, or an inability to safely store the firearms as the main reasons for participating in the exchange. It turns out some people don't even want these guns and would like to get rid of them. Imagine if we launched a national campaign like that, or like what Australia did in the 90s when it confiscated 650,000 guns. And as a result, gun deaths plummeted. Of course, in Australia, they didn't give out gas gift cards. They gave out Fosters because, you know, it's Australian for beer. Real talk, though, they don't drink Fosters in Australia. Fosters, it's Australian for beer, is just a marketing lie they invented to try to sell it to us, and they used Crocodile Dundee to do it. I trusted you, Croc. I trusted you when you lied to me. Foster's It's Australian for beer would be like if I were in a commercial on Australian TV where I said, Arby's, it's American for steak. Or if Republican senators said they claim to have discovered clear and long-lost proof that the Second Amendment said everyone is allowed to have all the guns they want, in that it's obvious bull. Because again, as we've seen, gun safety measures like assault weapons, bans, and gun buyback programs have worked. They have worked in other countries. When we've tried them, they've worked here too. Our gun production and ownership rates are simply off the charts, incomparable to any other nation on earth. And as a result, so are our gun deaths. It's within our power to stop this, and allowing these massacres to continue is, in fact, a choice, as Connecticut Senator Chris Murphy said in a speech on the Senate floor yesterday.
What are we doing? Why do you spend all this time running for the United States Senate? Why do you go through all the hassle of getting this job, of putting yourself in a position of authority, if your answer is that as this slaughter increases, as our kids run for their lives, we do nothing? What are we doing? Why are you here? I'm here on this floor to beg, to literally get down on my hands and knees and beg my colleagues. Find a path forward here. Work with us to find a way to pass laws that make this less likely.
This is a moment, if you are a person in a position of power, to ask yourself what you're doing to stop this. Because he's right. Why are you there? Why else are you in the United States Senate unless it's to raise money and give speeches and dole out favors and ride that secret little train in the Capitol basement that looks like the railroad to Disneyland, except instead of dropping you off at the Magic Kingdom, it brings you to Lindsey Graham's office? My office is like a castle, and that my Meemaw calls me a little Prince Charming. And yet, maddeningly, there are those who claim to support popular gun safety measures but aren't actually willing to use their power to get those measures passed, like West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin. CNN reported yesterday that Manchin says he would do anything I can to move common sense gun legislation forward, but still refused to eliminate the filibuster to get gun legislation through the Senate. Then you're not willing to do anything you can. It's like if you told your spouse you're willing to do anything to clean the dishes except get up from the couch. I can do it from here if you tie a sponge to a long stick. If you're willing to live with these horrors, then just say that. Just say you're willing to, but don't hide behind a bull procedural rule that, by the way, is not in the Constitution and didn't even exist when the Senate was created anyway. You guys all act like the Constitution has an entire section on the filibuster when the word isn't even so much as mentioned once. Maybe we need to get Nick Cage to burst into Manchin's office with a secret piece of parchment screaming, Joe, I found a note from John Adams in the Lincoln Memorial's taint. He said the filibuster is bull. No, of course Nick Cage would never agree to do that. But what about someone who does an excellent impression of him? Just think about it. And by the way, this is the same Senate that moved with the speed of a Saturn V rocket to give Supreme Court justices more security when some people were picketing outside their homes. So that should give you a sense of their priorities. When they do want to protect someone, they're capable of doing it quickly. And while the Manchins and Mitch McConnells of the world are offering their empty words and refusing to take action, the most depraved people in our politics are suggesting that instead of doing the obvious thing that many other countries have done successfully, which is to simply pass laws regulating the number of guns in the country and the ability to easily get them, we should instead arm teachers and essentially turn schools into fortified military bases.
The most effective tool for keeping kids safe is armed law enforcement on the campus.
People, retired military, retired law enforcement, outside the perimeter of every school in the country. They can donate their time. We can offer them tax breaks, no income tax in the state, no income tax federally, 10 hours a week, and we could have every school in America covered.
We have to harden these targets so no one can get in, ever, except through one entrance.
What we need to do is utilize smart technology. That's what's needed. We need to install man traps. This is something we've discussed in the past. Back in 2018, I checked. Man traps, a series of interlocking doors at the school entrance that are triggered by a tripwire.
We can't stop bad people from doing bad things. They're going to violate murder laws. They're not going to follow gun laws. I've never understood that argument. But we can harden these schools. We can create points of access that are difficult to get through. We can potentially arm and prepare and train teachers and other administrators to respond quickly.
Are you out of your mind? You guys want to turn schools into maximum security prisons with man traps and tripwires and teachers carrying guns? If these people had their way, everything would be a scene out of RoboCop. There are truly no words for how grotesque this is. They want to arm teachers, and yet they're not even willing to throw enough money at schools to get them history books that don't end with the fall of the Berlin Wall. And that's right there. Kids, that's how Ronald Reagan saved democracy. If you want to know what happened after that, get into college. And to the people who cynically parrot the mindless talking point that advocates for gun reform are somehow politicizing this, what else is politics for? It's a crisis, and this is what our political system is supposed to do, address the crisis. If that's all you can muster in the wake of this horror, that tired, empty mantra, then you need to look inward, because we can do something. We know from our experience, our own experience, and from the experiences of other countries, it's possible. It has not always been like this. It doesn't always have to be like this. We can change things. And if you're a person in a position of power, you must act. Because if you choose to spend this moment in the wake of this horror, using your power to do nothing, then you are a
Fraud. I repeat the word fraud.
This has been A Closer Look. God's Love We Deliver cooks and brings over 2 million meals a year to men, women, and children living with HIV, AIDS, cancer, and other serious illnesses, and they need your help. Now more than ever, if you're watching this online, you can hit the donate button. Stay safe, get vaccinated. We love you.